Thank you, Mr. President. I'm nearing the end of my Senate term, and I'm reflecting on some historic events which I've witnessed at this table, at this desk. One of the most historic I remember, and specifically the date, January 6th, 2021. The reason why that day was important was that the votes all across America had been counted to see who was elected president in the 2020 election. And the process involved certification by the House and the Senate of the electoral votes that were to be counted. In the past, it has been almost a pro forma event, hardly noticed by anyone. But on January 6, 2021, it was much different, much different. The presiding officer of the Senate for that electoral vote count is the Vice President of the United States. In this case, it was Vice President Pence. There was more security than usual in the Capitol building. To those who are here today witnessing this session and visiting the Capitol, you're lucky. You're protected by one of the best security forces, police forces in the nation, the Capitol Hill Police. Most Americans don't know much about them. Those of us who serve in Congress know a lot about them. These are men and women who keep you safe and me safe in the Capitol building and make sure that the visitors have peace of mind when they come and go. We want to maintain the availability of this building to visitors from certainly the United States, but from all around the world. And these men and women, some in uniform, some in ordinary dress, make sure that happens. Well, on January 6, 2021, there was a special emphasis on security. The reason, it was not only an historic event with members of Congress in their chairs and the Vice President of the United States presiding over the Senate, there was also a rally going on downtown by the president, the outgoing president of the United States, Donald Trump, at the end of his first term. He had summoned his supporters and friends to come for a rally down by the White House, the Washington Monument, that day. No coincidence. It was an attempt to put pressure on Congress not to count the electoral votes. You see, the president then and now had this fiction in his mind that he actually won the election. He was only off by 7 million votes. That's how much he lost it by. But he kept filing lawsuits and making protests and arguing that he should be president again. At one point, he dispatched the thousands of people that he had summoned to Washington to leave the Washington Monument area and to march on the Capitol, and they did. So we were sitting inside with the knowledge that these thousands of people were coming up to our building here, the Capitol building, where we did business on this historic day. We didn't quite know what they would do when they arrived. But if you witness the videotapes from that day, draw your own conclusions. They tried to storm the Capitol. They broke through locked doors, crashed through windows to come to the building. At approximately 10 minutes after 2 o'clock in the afternoon on January 6, 2021, I was seated in this desk. Vice President Pence was presiding, and I noticed something curious. Those doors opened, and members of the Secret Service came in and literally grabbed the Vice President and pulled him out of that chair, took him out that door. And here we sat with no announcement, nothing. But we knew something was going on outside with this rally that had been directed up this way. In a few minutes, a representative of the Capitol Police spoke to us sitting in the chamber and said, stay calm, stay where you are. We're going to make this chamber, the Senate chamber, a safe place for you to stay no matter what happens in the rest of the building. So some of us relaxed in our chairs and looked around and waited for the next development. The next development took about 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, the Capitol Police came and said, disregard that earlier alert, leave in an orderly fashion, file through those doors, and follow us to a safe location. So we abandoned the Senate chamber, and the Capitol and left to go to a building nearby and wait out this ordeal which was going on in the Senate. What happened, you can witness yourself on videotape. It's all there. About 150 of our Capitol Police were assaulted by these demonstrators. Some seriously injured. Others pushed to the brink psychologically, which led to their deaths a day or two later. It was a horrible scene. It wasn't until late in the afternoon that we were able to return to the Senate to complete our business with the electoral vote. What followed from that with the new president was an attempt to investigate what happened that day and who should be held responsible. There was nothing extraordinary about that. Anyone who did damage to this great building or the people in it obviously should be held accountable. And so the largest investigation in the history of the Department of Justice and the FBI started. At the end of the day, almost 1,500 individuals were charged with a crime, and they were convicted. Some of them paid a fine, some served brief periods of time, and others more serious offenses depending on what they did. That was the reality of what happened. Fast forward 4 years, and what happened next? President Trump was reelected. And with the power under the Constitution to pardon those who committed crime, on his first day in office, in his second term, President Trump gave a full and unconditional pardon to every one of the convicted demonstrators who stormed this building. If you remember the scenes afterwards, it wasn't just an orderly procession of people visiting this building. They crashed through doors, they broke windows, they did their darndest to cause as much damage as possible. C-SPAN, which televised what happened here, kept the cameras running, and we were able to see them scramble into the Senate chamber, pose for pictures sitting in the chair of the presiding officer, and rifle through our desks. I watched as some person, I still don't know who it was, went through my desk to look and see if there were some things that he could take that day. I don't know whether he did or not. But that's the sort of thing that went on for 4 or 5 hours while an effort was made to mobilize police and state troopers and others to reclaim the Capitol building from the demonstrators. The reason I bring up this event years later is because there's an important issue to be voted on this week by the United States Senate, and that is the choice of the next Attorney General of the United States. The acting Attorney General is Todd Blanche, who was President Trump's personal lawyer when he was charged with crimes, and who has been Deputy Attorney General for months now. He's seeking the full-time position. One of the items of controversy is pretty easy to explain. President Trump believes, and Todd Blanche believed at one point, that the people who attacked the Capitol, the people who breached the Capitol, crashed through the doors, broke down the windows, threatened individuals inside, should receive financial compensation for doing it. Financial compensation. And you say to yourself, they got a full unconditional pardon by President Trump. Now they want money too? And the answer is not only yes, but unfortunately, they've done it with some pride. The Trump administration proposed an anti-weaponization fund. And just to give it a cute little twist, they appropriated $1,776,000,000 for that purpose. Well, it didn't go over very well with Congress, because as we read this decree by the Trump administration, people said, wait a minute, we're giving money to people who were convicted of a crime of attacking the Capitol, disrupting the business of the Senate, injuring 149 Capitol policemen. We're going to give them not only a pardon, but some sort of financial compensation. That was the plan, the anti-weaponization fund. And who was the person who executed that plan? Todd Blanche, the person who is seeking to become the next full-time Attorney General of the United States. The controversy involving that particular proposal was well known. Not only was there a bad reaction among Democrats, to this idea, but many Republicans as well. Some of them kept their opposition behind closed doors, I understand, but others were very vocal about it. In fact, 2 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee said they wanted in writing from Todd Blanche a promise that he would never create this fund to reward cop beaters and demonstrators in the Capitol on January 6, 2021. It went forward in the Senate Judiciary Committee. The negotiations between 2 Republican senators and Todd Blanche continued until the beginning of this week when it was announced they'd reached an agreement. Sadly, that agreement, the so-called agreement not to create the weaponization fund, is written in a way it wouldn't pass Law School Contracts 101. There's no signature on any of these pages of promises when it comes to future activity. They say we're rescinding the previous order, but there's nothing to stop a new order from taking place. That is a gaping hole in the logic and the effectiveness of any of these documents. We should have clear indications from the parties to that lawsuit that both sides agree. That would include the President of the United States, who was a party to the lawsuit that led up to this. But they can't bring it together because the President doesn't believe that the anti-weaponization fund should go away. He said publicly, over and over again, he believes in it, wants to do it, wants to give the demonstrators money. Todd Blanche thinks he's taken care of this problem, but he has not produced any documentation to make that point clear. Secondly, there was a provision in a lawsuit. Now, here's what the lawsuit's all about. The President sued the IRS and Treasury, arguing that they disclosed his income tax returns without his permission. They arrested the man who actually did it. They caught him, and he was prosecuted as he should be. He broke the law. He knew he was breaking the law when he disclosed the President's income tax returns. The President sued the IRS and Treasury for billions of dollars, billions, because they disclosed his income tax return. I'm completing quite a few years of public service. I've disclosed my income tax return every year without fail as a member of Congress and the Senate. I'm not posing for holy pictures. I'm just trying to tell you it isn't that big a deal if you follow the law. Do you know what the settlement of the Trump lawsuit was for disclosing his income tax returns? Part of the settlement said, get this now, and Todd Blanche is the draftsman of this as well. Part of it said, neither the President, his family, or any of the companies in his Trump empire business can be held for violating any tax crimes in the United States. How would you like that? Get out of jail free card. And that was part of the agreement. And it should be contested. If we say no one in America is above the law, how in the world can you justify doing this for the Trump family and their businesses? And we know this president deals in big numbers when it comes to income. His first year in office, estimates between $1.4 and $2 billion in the president's first year in office in his second term. $2 billion. How'd he do it? Well, you won't be surprised to know that there are cryptocurrency fingerprints all over this deal. The president made hundreds of millions of dollars off of a meme coin or some contraption that comes out of the cryptocurrency world. That's the reality. And who was overseeing this operation? Todd Blanche, a man who wants to be the #1 law enforcement officer in the United States of America. Well, I'll tell you, I'm not going to go much longer because I see some of my colleagues are gathering and they want to speak on this issue as well. This is a serious mistake for the Senate to approve Todd Blanche as the next Attorney General. If there is ever a moment in history when we need an Attorney General above reproach who is clearly dedicated to ending corruption, even at the highest level of our government, it's right now. The history of this era will be written, and it'll be a shameful history for those who are empowering this man, Todd Blanche, to take his personal representation of this president to the highest possible level as he becomes the next Attorney General. I beg my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I think I know how many of you feel privately, and I know you're afraid to cross this president. He's been guilty of retribution many times in the past, and he would be on this side. But don't be in the history books on the wrong side when it comes to this issue. Come out against corruption. Come out for the prosecution of corporate fraud. Come out for changing the current situation in the United States to one that is more respectful of the law and more respectful of the families and voters who create this democracy. I urge my colleagues to join me in opposing the nomination of Todd Blanche as the next Attorney General of the United States. And Mr. President, I yield the floor.